I wanted to talk about action for happiness with an emphasis on that first word, action. The action that comes from happiness and the action that produces happiness. I was with the Dalai Lama 2 days ago in the O2 Arena. This is the most embarrassing moment in my life. My phone is ringing. Didn't ring all day. I don't know who it is. I'm going to ignore it. So I'm with the Dalai Lama in the arena. I've been in London 2 days, and I know that he is a big fan of the BBC. And he listens every morning to the BBC World News, 5:30, wherever he is. And I've been watching and listening to the BBC since I come, and I asked him the question I really wondered about, which was, how do you keep from getting depressed? The BBC. And he said something very interesting. He said, you know, the news focuses on what's bad today, the acts of cruelty, the unkindness, the things actually that for survival we need to know about, to be vigilant about. But he said, if you put all the negative acts that you hear about in the news on one side of a scale, like a scale of justice, and you put all of the acts of kindness that people do every day, you know, moms making sandwiches for the kids in school, and on up, the acts of kindness far outweigh the acts of negativity. And I see enormous potential here for each of us to contribute to this side of the scale that's the kind side. In writing a book that's just come out here, The Force for Good, the Dalai Lama's vision for our world, he outlines an action plan which fits perfectly with what's going on here. He says the first step is to look inside, manage our own destructive emotions, as we heard. And when you do that, as my friend Richie Davidson would tell you, when you minimize destructive emotions, you actually get happier. That's what's left. That's the part of us that is there just naturally. The second step is what Matthew's been talking about, adopt an ethic of compassion, this caring attitude. And then the Dalai Lama says, it's not enough to get our inner world intact. We need to do something in the outer world. He says, for example, there are 5 areas that he emphasizes. The first is, let's clean up the public sphere. There's corruption, the collusion. We need transparency and accountability. His compassion is very muscular. I was quite surprised by that. He's a big fan of the Pope. We finally have a Pope who believes what Jesus said. It's really wonderful. You know, a church of the poor and by the poor. And he wrote him a fan letter when the Pope fired the Bishop of Bling. Do you remember the bishop that built a 43 million euro palace for himself? The Dalai Lama thought that was fantastic. So clean up the public sphere. And then he says, let's look at the economy. Our economic system is vastly unfair. The gap between rich and poor is growing steadily. And Richard, of course, has done much to bring other ways of thinking about what makes an economy actually successful, fulfillment, satisfaction. But the Dalai Lama says, also, we shouldn't just take our inner satisfaction as a metric of success economically. We need to do something that matters in terms of the inequities, the economic inequities. We talked about, when I was interviewing him for the book, about companies, for example, that are doing good, not just well. I told him about a company in the States. Do you have Ben & Jerry's ice cream here? Oh, you do? Do you know chocolate fudge brownie? It's a really yummy flavor. The brownie in chocolate fudge brownie is made in a place called the Greyston Bakery in the Bronx. The Bronx is a very poor part of New York City. The Greyston Bakery was founded to help give jobs to homeless people who had families, to ex-convicts, people who were just on the periphery, could never find a job otherwise. Their motto is, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. The Dalai Lama loved that. The third area of action he proposes is helping those in need. And helping those in need doesn't necessarily mean, you know, those in extreme need, the handicapped and so on. If you look around you, if each of us look around in our life space, there are all kinds of needs that we can help other people with. I loved what Jasmine said, that Once she became happier through action, she realized I could reinvent myself. I could help other people in pain. And each of us has a kind of internal talent or mission that we can share with other people. Then the fourth area, which seems idealistic now given what's happening, is a world of dialogue, not war. But this also means, he says, recognizing the oneness of humanity, getting beyond the surface differences to recognize the way in which each of us is the same as a human being. And then finally, he says, the future of the world is in the hands of our children and their children. He says, educate the heart. And that we saw a great example of that in those school kids. And this program, he said, is something that each of us can take on in our own way. It doesn't matter what we do, he says. What matters is that we act. And in doing this, he takes a very optimistic view. He met the late Queen Mother when she turned 100. And he says, I asked her, you've lived a century. Do you think the world's getting better or getting worse? And she said, immediately, it's getting better. The first thing she named was that during her lifetime, all the British colonies had become independent. As a resident of a former British colony, I thought that was very compassionate of her. And then she named, human rights and so on. And he takes this long view. He says, each of us should act now, even if we will not live to see the fruits of what we do. What matters is that we move, move things in a better direction. And finally, let me end with some advice he gives. He says, when you're about to do something, consider who benefits. Is it just me or a group? Is it just my group or everyone? And is it just for now or is it for the future? Thank you very much.